Birthdays are meant to be fun, friends gathering, candles lit. But sometimes,
Unexpected moments happen, and the mood changes without warning. In this video, you'll hear 3 scary horror stories that happened on birthdays. Moments that started as simple celebration and slowly turned into something far more unsettling. If you enjoy horror stories like this, like the video and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel even more, super thanks are always appreciated.
I live in a high-rise apartment complex in downtown Seattle. I chose this specific building because of its strict security protocols. Access requires a localized key fob. You need to swipe it to enter the parking garage, swipe it again to enter the main lobby, and swipe a third time to operate the elevator, which only allows access to the floor you reside on. I moved here specifically for this peace of mind. Last November, on a Tuesday evening, I returned home from work at exactly 6 o'clock. As I walked down my hallway, I noticed an object sitting on the floor directly in front of my door. It was a large, heavy, white bakery box. There was a printed receipt taped firmly to the top of the lid. I leaned down and read it. It had my full legal name, Sarah Elizabeth Collins, and my exact apartment number printed clearly on the paper. Written in thick black marker across the white space of the receipt were the words, "Happy Birthday." The immediate problem with this delivery was that my birthday is in April. This was November. I unlocked my door, brought the box inside, and set it on the kitchen island. I initially assumed it was a clerical error made by the bakery, or perhaps a confused relative sending a gift at the entirely wrong time of year. I lifted the cardboard lid. Inside was a massive, heavy red velvet cake. The frosting was immaculate. It featured dark cream cheese piping around the edges, with words written in dark red gel in the center. The message read, "Happy birthday, Sarah, you earned it." I looked at the receipt again to locate the name of the bakery. It was a well-known high-end pastry shop located about 3 miles from my building. I picked up my phone and called them, hoping to find out who had placed the order. A manager answered the phone. He looked up the transaction number on my receipt. He told me the cake was ordered and paid for in cash by a man who had walked into their storefront that morning. The manager stated the man provided the specific text for the cake icing and requested it be delivered by a private courier service no later than 5 in the afternoon. I asked for a physical description of the man. The manager apologized, stating they had a massive morning rush and he could not recall any specific details about the customer. I hung up the phone and looked back at the cake. I felt a sharp, distinct sense of unease. The phrase, "You earned it," did not sound like a friendly greeting. It sounded like a threat. I decided I did not want the item inside my apartment any longer. I planned to throw it down the trash chute located at the end of my hallway, but the box was much too large to fit through the metal disposal flap. I went to a drawer, grabbed a large kitchen knife, and decided to cut the cake into smaller pieces so I could flush them down the garbage disposal in my sink. I pressed the blade of the knife into the exact center of the red velvet cake. About 2 inches down, the metal blade struck something solid. It felt like hard plastic. It did not yield to the pressure of the knife. I grabbed a metal spatula and began scraping away the sponge and frosting. Buried deep inside the cake was a tightly wrapped bundle. It was covered in thick, clear packing tape. I pulled the sticky object out, walked over to the sink, and ran it under warm water to wash away the cake residue. It was a dense bundle, roughly the size of a deck of playing cards. I used scissors to carefully cut through the thick layers of tape. Inside the tape was a small sealed plastic sandwich bag. Inside that were 2 distinct items. The first item was a Washington State driver's license. The second item was a heavy brass key. I wiped my hands and picked up the driver's license. The name printed on it was Rebecca Thorne. I recognized the name instantly, and my blood ran cold. Rebecca Thorne was a 28-year-old woman who had been reported missing from the neighborhood directly adjacent to mine exactly 4 days prior. Her face had been broadcast on local news stations all week. She had vanished without a trace while walking home from a bus stop. I put the license down and picked up the brass key. It looked completely identical to the emergency backup key the building management had given me when I first signed my lease. I walked over to my front door. I inserted the brass key into my deadbolt and turned it. The lock clicked open perfectly. I immediately locked the door again and dialed emergency services. The police arrived within 20 minutes. They confiscated the cake, the packaging, the tape, the driver's license, and the brass key. Crime scene technicians dusted my front door and the surrounding walls for fingerprints. Detectives went down to the lobby and reviewed the building's security footage. The video showed a standard, uniformed courier dropping the box at my door and leaving immediately. The police later informed me that they visited the bakery, but the shop's security cameras had been malfunctioning on the specific morning the man ordered the cake. Rebecca Thorne has never been found. The police consider it an active homicide investigation. The locks on my door were changed that same night by emergency maintenance, but I could not sleep in that apartment again. I broke my lease, packed my belongings, and moved out of state 2 weeks later. Someone out there abducted a woman, took her identification, somehow obtained a master key to my secure apartment, baked both items into a custom cake, and had it delivered directly to my living space. I still do not know why I was chosen, what I supposedly earned, or when the person who sent it might decide to visit me again. Last month, I was preparing to move across the country to accept a new job offer in a different state. To help me pack my belongings, my parents drove over and brought several large plastic storage bins filled with old items from my childhood bedroom. They wanted me to sort through everything and decide what I wanted to keep and what could be donated to charity. It was 2 days before my 30th birthday. I spent the entire evening sitting on my living room floor, going through the bins. I sifted through old report cards, youth baseball trophies, and forgotten books. At the very bottom of the second plastic bin, I found a bright yellow disposable Kodak film camera. The cardboard casing was heavily worn and faded from age. Written in black permanent marker on the back of the camera were the words Tommy's 10th birthday. I vividly remembered having that exact camera. My parents had purchased it for me to use at my 10th birthday party so I could take my own photos of my friends. I also clearly remembered losing the camera shortly after the party ended and being incredibly upset about it. It had clearly been found years later by my parents and tossed into a storage bin without a second thought. Curiosity got the better of me. The next morning, I took the disposable camera to a local pharmacy that still operated a machine to process 35mm film. The technician at the counter told me the film was likely degraded due to its age, but they would process it and see what they could salvage. I returned to the store and picked up the developed photos on the late afternoon of my actual 30th birthday. There were exactly 24 photos inside the paper envelope. I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot and looked through them one by one. The first 15 photos were exactly what you would expect a 10-year-old child to take. There were blurry shots of my friends eating pizza at the dining table, extreme close-ups of our golden retriever sleeping on the rug, and crooked photos of the backyard playset. The 16th photo was drastically different. The perspective of the camera was much higher off the ground, clearly taken by an adult standing at full height. It was a photograph of the exterior of my childhood home, taken from the street during the middle of the night. The flash of the camera illuminated the metal mailbox displaying our house number. The 17th photo was taken from our backyard, facing the rear of the house. It showed the glass sliding door that led directly into our kitchen. The interior kitchen light was turned on. Through the glass, you could clearly see my mother standing at the sink, wiping down the countertops with a towel. My heart rate elevated significantly. I flipped to the 18th photo. It was taken from inside the house. The perspective was from the bottom of the basement stairs, pointing upward at the closed wooden door that led to the main hallway. Whoever took the picture was standing in our basement. The 19th photo was taken in the upstairs hallway. It showed the doors to my parents' bedroom and my own bedroom. Both bedroom doors were closed. The digital timestamp printed on the bottom right corner of the physical image read 2:14 in the morning. The 20th photo was taken inside my bedroom. The camera flash had been turned off for this shot. The image was grainy and severely underexposed, but it clearly showed me, at 10 years old, asleep in my bed. Standing right next to the bed, visible only from the waist down in the dim light, was a figure wearing dark denim jeans and heavy leather work boots. Photos 21 through 23 were entirely black. They showed nothing. I stared at the 24th and final photo. It was not a picture of the house or any people. It was an extreme close-up shot of a piece of lined notebook paper resting flat on a wooden surface. Written on the paper in neat, block letters was a single message. I am going to wait until you are 30. I sat in the driver's seat of my car for a very long time, trying to process what I was looking at. The timeline of events did not make any logical sense. The disposable camera was lost after my birthday party had concluded. That meant someone had taken the camera, remained hidden inside our house overnight, photographed me sleeping in my bed, written that note, photographed the note, and then placed the camera back somewhere inside the house where my parents would eventually find it and pack it away. I started my engine and drove directly back to my current house. I parked in the driveway and walked up the concrete path to my front porch. Resting squarely on my welcome mat was a small, square, wrapped gift box. There was no shipping label attached. There was no return address. The wrapping paper used to cover the box was a vintage, brightly colored pattern. It was the exact same patterned wrapping paper my parents had used to wrap my gifts on my 10th birthday. I did not touch the box. I did not unlock my front door or go inside my house. I immediately turned around, got back into my car, drove to a crowded diner 3 miles away, and called the police. The county bomb squad arrived and utilized a robotic device to open the package in the middle of my front yard. It did not contain an explosive device. The lead detective on the scene called me over to inspect the contents. Inside the cardboard box was a single heavy metal object. It was a brass-handled door lock. It was the exact deadbolt assembly removed from the front door of my childhood home. The police searched the perimeter of my current property. They found a set of fresh, deep footprints pressed into the soft soil directly beneath my ground floor bedroom window. The person who stood in my room 20 years ago is still out there. They know exactly where I live today, and they know exactly how old I am. For the past 10 years, I have spent my birthday the exact same way. I rent a small off-grid cabin located in a densely wooded area of the Oregon Cascades. The property has no cellular service, no internet connection, and is accessed only by driving down a 5-mile dirt logging road. I do this intentionally to disconnect from my stressful job in corporate finance and enjoy 3 consecutive days of absolute silence. It is a tradition I look forward to all year. 2 years ago, for my 40th birthday, I drove up to the cabin on a Friday afternoon late in October. The weather was rapidly turning cold, and a heavy, gray fog had settled deep into the valley. I arrived at the property around 4 in the afternoon. The property management company always leaves the physical key to the cabin inside a combination lockbox attached to the front porch railing. When I pulled my truck up to the front of the cabin and shifted into park, I noticed something wrong. The heavy wooden front door was standing open about 2 inches. I stayed inside my locked vehicle for several minutes with the engine running. Break-ins do happen in remote wilderness areas, usually perpetrated by teenagers looking for a place to drink or squatters seeking shelter from the cold. I reached into my glove compartment and retrieved a heavy metal flashlight. I stepped out of the truck and cautiously approached the porch. I called out loudly, announcing my presence, stating clearly that I was the rightful renter and that I was coming inside. There was no response. The woods were entirely silent. I reached out and pushed the door open. The interior of the cabin was incredibly warm. The large wood-burning stove situated in the corner of the living room was lit and radiating intense heat. Hanging from the exposed wooden ceiling beams were dozens of black and silver helium balloons. A large, professionally printed vinyl banner was tacked directly above the stone fireplace. The banner read, "Happy 40th birthday, Mark." My first logical thought was that my younger brother or my close friends had coordinated with the property management company to surprise me. I smiled, relieved, and walked further into the main room. In the center of the space was a circular wooden dining table. It was meticulously set for a formal dinner for 4 people. There were white ceramic plates, polished silver cutlery, and folded cloth napkins at each seat. In the exact center of the table was a large, unlit chocolate birthday cake. Resting flat on the table right next to the cake was a large, razor-sharp hunting knife with a bone handle. I walked over to the table to look at the place settings more closely. Placed carefully at each of the 4 settings was a small, white cardstock place card with a single name written in neat, cursive handwriting. I looked at the card positioned at the head of the table. It read Mark. I looked at the card to my left. It read David. I looked at the card to my right. It read Arthur. I looked at the card on the opposite side of the table. It read Elias. I stared at the names for a long time. I do not have any friends or family members named David, Arthur, or Elias. The initial confusion I felt rapidly shifted into a very cold, rational sense of panic. I am an avid reader of local news, specifically concerning incidents in the wilderness areas of the Pacific Northwest. I knew those names. David Reynolds, Arthur Vance, and Elias Corrin were all adult men who had gone missing in this specific region of the Cascade Mountains over the past 18 months. Massive search and rescue operations had been launched for all 3 men. None of them had ever been found. The exact moment I made that mental connection, I heard a distinct sound coming from the dark back hallway of the cabin. It was the undeniable sound of a wooden floorboard creaking under the weight of a heavy footstep. I did not call out. I did not move toward the hallway to investigate. I slowly backed away from the dining table, keeping my eyes locked on the darkness of the corridor. I moved quickly and silently out the front door, leaving it open exactly as I had found it. I got into my truck, started the engine, and drove back down the treacherous dirt logging road at a reckless speed. I did not stop until I reached the paved state highway and acquired a cellular signal. I drove straight to the nearest state police barracks and reported the entire incident to the officer at the front desk. 2 armed state troopers escorted me back up the mountain to the cabin. We arrived roughly 2 hours after I had initially fled the scene. The front door of the cabin was now completely closed and locked. We used the key from the lockbox to enter the building. The cabin was completely empty. The black and silver balloons, the vinyl banner, the meticulous table settings, the chocolate cake, and the bone-handled hunting knife were all gone. The fire inside the wood-burning stove had been thoroughly extinguished with water. The only evidence that anyone had been inside the cabin at all was a single, small item left resting squarely in the center of the bare wooden dining table. It was a small black plastic digital wristwatch. The state troopers collected the watch, placed it in an evidence bag, and took my formal statement. A week later, a detective called me to follow up on the investigation. He confirmed that the serial number on the digital watch matched property belonging to Arthur Vance. The police never found the person who decorated the cabin that day. They never located the remains of the missing men. I have never returned to the Cascade Mountains, and I no longer celebrate my birthday. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.